First of all, I will just say happy birthday. Congratulations. That's really great. It's really great to be here today on your special celebration day. I'm a fairly recent addition to this community, but it's been really welcoming and it seems like a really great constructive community and space to be involved with. So thank you for having me. I'm going to give a quick introduction to protocols.io, just because I'm not sure if everybody will be completely familiar. And then I'll talk a bit about my involvement and just the different way that community plays in with protocols.io and where I see culture change being needed and or already being impactful in that space. So for researchers, as a rule, they have a variety of different research outputs. We do pretty well, and there have been a lot of initiatives in place that are aimed at capturing open access to research articles, but also for code that's generated, for data that's generated, for citations that are included within the papers themselves. But we haven't seen anywhere near the same kind of effort around making sure that we capture the full details of the methods that have gone into creating those experiments, so actually generating the data. So a big issue that's resulted from this is around reproducibility of research. So here's a tweet from a biologist who was looking for a protocol in a published manuscript, which cited another earlier published manuscript, cites another earlier published manuscript, and maybe you hit a paywall, or maybe eventually someone just says by conventional methods or something like that. It's possible there might be some details in a lab notebook, but that may have had major coffee spills or just have been lost, or a laptop hard drive could have exploded somewhere along the way. So lots of times people can't actually access the information. They can't get to how that experiment was managed and performed. And so this leads to a lot of frustration. And that's really where we come in, the tool that we have, protocols.io. The URL I've got at the top is a great place to start if people haven't looked and they want to have a look around. But our mission's pretty simple. We want to make it easy to share method details before, during, and after publication. It's essentially an open access repository. So anything that is published on there will be open access with a CC BY license. So anyone can use it, reuse it, do anything they like with it, essentially build on it, lots of other things. And we've set up in a way that's very similar to publishers of the more traditional publisher content. So we make sure everything's archived adequately. It won't go missing if anything happens to our company, which hopefully won't, but everything's mirrored. There are public APIs and ways to get the content out if you want to. So if people have concerns, and that is a very reasonable concern that's flagged to us a lot of times by a lot of people about whether they should trust our platform. But a lot of effort's gone into making open access a real kind of underlying premise of what we do. Just to give a shout out to Open Access Week, which is this week, and so I've got that very heavily on my mind at the moment. So Protocols.io was launched in 2014, and that's the kind of steady growth that I'm showing here of the content that we have. We get about 1,000 new protocols each month, and about in total, there are just over, I think, 8,500 now public protocols, but a lot more private protocols. So people might be developing them within groups, within communities, within their labs, privately developing the content before they publish it, or maybe it's just for use by their lab without publishing it that way. And so there are a lot of sort of self-organized communities who make use of Protocols.io. This is just to show what one looks like when it's been published. They really allow users to input and experiment, any kind of experiment, any area of research, like a recipe. So someone else can very easily come in and follow what was done, how the researcher did what they did. It can be made public or private, as I've said before, but it's really rich in allowing user to input specific granular detail, metadata. I don't know if you can, how well you can see there's a place for materials, the guidelines. You can really get tips and tricks and quirks of how to make that protocol work can come from the user in this presentation. There is a place for a user to flag if they get the experiment to work. So works for me, which is essentially a community peer review, right? It's someone else saying, I followed this protocol and I've made it work. It's definitely something that works. But beyond that, it's also very collaborative and interactive. There are lots of ways for users to comment and engage with the content and discuss what's been presented on there directly with the authors of the protocols. We also have really easy way of versioning content. So if you discover a mistake, it's really easy to create a new version and place it, and they'll always be linked and you can track changes between them. So there's a lot of dynamism about how the information is presented even after it's published, very much like preprints in a way. So you can, this is kind of where some community change comes in. It's really easy, I'm flicking backwards and forwards, it's really easy for a user who's published a protocol on protocols.io to link to that protocol from the materials and methods of their research manuscript. So where a materials and methods might often have long narrative text, actually they can just drop the DOI to the protocol into the materials and methods, which allows anyone then to get access to that much more granular information provided. And if you click on the DOI, you get taken to protocols.io. And this is where the brilliance of the versioning comes in. If there is a newer version, you'll immediately be told that there is a newer version and you can view that one. So you can come to the newer version and see that latest version. So why I call that brilliant is because it really allows this dynamic permanence. So if the author has found an error in the protocol or has realized that something wasn't very clear and they want to make it clearer for the users, they can create a new version, but they don't have to go back to the publisher to issue a correction. They can literally just create the new version on protocols.io incredibly easily for free. No bureaucracy around publisher correction issuing necessary at all. And I'm hoping this little movie will play, but I don't know if it will. Let's see. So hopefully you can see this. I talked about commenting being possible on the protocols themselves, and this is really where any user can come in and ask questions on a protocol, and the author themselves will then be able to answer. So this is a very well accessed protocol that we have on the site, and it has hundreds of comments and back and forth with the author. And interestingly, it was Steve Henikoff, who's quite a well-known scientist. He'd already published this method in a paper, but he was getting so many email questions about the method that he chose to put it on protocols.io, because then he could have this dynamic public FAQ essentially on the paper, on the protocol, on our site. And so other people would see the questions without needing to come to him every time. And so for me, this is really a community effort. The entire scientific community, or the people who work in these disciplines, by creating a platform like this, there's an open location for communities to self-form around the content as it goes up. And we're seeing that to be really successful, actually. But it is a change in culture and a change in behavior that's needed for more people to embrace that, basically. So I need to speed up a bit, I think. Another way that we have kind of community involvement is that we have an ambassador program. So we invite researchers and students, industry people who are interested in promoting and collaborating on protocols.io to this group. And it's the screenshot here is the workspace, which is essentially a protocols workspace for any kind of group who's using the system, just where members are kind of collated. And again, this just has monthly meetings, and we might run ideas about new features by the people in that community. And we hope to represent different disciplines and also different diversity groups who need more representation. So we've been looking at working on accessibility. We've become aware that in some instances, protocols are being adapted and being made much more explicit and clearer for some people with specific nonverbal disabilities, for example, so that they can much more easily follow the protocol step by step. It's very clear, very concise in a stepwise manner. So we had a podcast on that fairly recently. So we're drawing on expertise of different groups and different people in this ambassador program to try and help guide us as we move forward. So sometimes it's about accessibility, sometimes it's about what should we add to make our platform appeal more to this different subject discipline, like chemistry or something like that. And so I think we're hoping to keep an eye on what CSCCE does here, and it's helpful and informative to just talk more about how to engage communities this way. And then it's just worth noting, I think, that open access of methods like this facilitates community research connections. So what I'm showing here on top left is a tweet from a scientist in Chile who was looking for a protocol for an experiment in neuron culture, so in brain cells. After a few back and forth tweets, there was a postdoc at UCSF who suggested a protocol that was on protocols.io. And when you looked at that protocol, it became clear that it was associated with the paper published in GigaScience that was actually about a similar method, but applied to a stickleback parasite, so a fish parasite. So I think without the protocol, you never would have made the association between looking for an experiment on neuron cultures and a fish parasite paper to see the commonality that would have meant that there was a relevant method in that paper. So I think in a way, by deconstructing research into these modules, create the opportunity for real big community building around the methods being used rather than the discipline that someone's actually working in. So it sort of just deconstructs the paper a little bit in a way that facilitates a lot more connection between users, or researchers, I should say. And then this is the last example of the community kind of way that we form in Protocols.io is that anyone can have their own workspace, and a lot of researchers do, and for their groups they maybe keep it private, but we create sometimes open workspaces, and we set this one up. It was Anita, who some of you maybe are familiar with as well from Protocols.io, when she noticed at the start of the year that we were getting a lot of coronavirus methods. We formed this coronavirus method development community, and it organically has been the fastest growing group that we've ever had on Protocols.io. And the numbers aren't accurate on this screenshot. I think I took this a lot earlier in the year. I think there's well over 400 members, probably 100 or so publications in there now of different methods. It's been a real amazing location for people to swap and share methods around coronavirus, all sorts of different things, sequencing, virus loading, etc., etc. So that's been really interesting to see that we get these self-forming communities, and the discussions in here have been amazing too. So people trying to work out mechanisms for testing in countries that don't have as many kind of things at their disposal, the means as some other countries have, you know, the low-cost testing that could happen in Antigua, I think was the specific case that I saw. So it's kind of fantastic to see how that has self-created actually in a way. And then I think, you know, around journals and publishers and funders and institutions, they also kind of self-create individual communities that use tools like Protocols.io. What will be nice is just to see more connections between all of these at a higher level, I think, over time. But that's growing, I think, and I think more interconnections between different tools as well. So I'm excited about what the future brings for this space. And ultimately, you know, this is one module in the open research community. I think it facilitates a lot of good things for science and for research around reproducibility and connections and communities. But it's just one piece of the bigger picture around a really amazing, vibrant, open research community. And of course, none of it would be possible without the Protocols.io team. So it's only a small company. And I wouldn't say that I've built it. When you introduced me at the start, I'm a recent addition to that team, and the guys have really created an amazing system. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.